panel. So if I can have the following people come up, please. DeMareon Gipson, Darius, Alton Williams, Miss Chayla Gibson, and Teresa Baker, the Barely. The bear whisperer. You go ahead and sit right here. Okay, so if you could all, camera right here. If you could all, from Teresa.
Oh, sorry, one thing.
No.
Can we all have you all use the microphone for recording purposes? Because we're trying to make this on fleek, okay?
Okay, so from Teresa down, if you could all pick up the microphone and introduce yourselves and what you do.
My name is Teresa Baker, and I work, first of all, I want to acknowledge the land we're on, the Ohlone land that we are on. I work on efforts of diversity and inclusion in the outdoors. I engage communities of color in outdoor spaces across the country. I work with the National Park Service, Latino Outdoors, Native Outdoors, various affinity groups across the country to engage communities of color in outdoor spaces.
Peace. My name is DeMareon Gipson. I am an author, a poet, and I work for the city of Oakland for their libraries. And I usually bridge together art with social justice things. I'm actually going to be working with incarcerated youth pretty soon, bringing poetry programs to them for Camp Sweeney with the Alameda County Library, and also substitute teaching. And I publish my own books. I have a small business where I independently press up my books and distribute them via my website in like local business stores. I won an award from the Academy of American Poets, and I just do art and social justice stuff. That's what I prefer to do. So.
Hi, I'm Chayla Gibson. I'm a founding team member and head of HR and diversity and equity at Caliber Schools in Richmond. We have 2 charter schools, kindergarten through 8th grade, and I work a lot on diversity and just making sure that our staff and the students are treated fairly and that there's no disproportionate amounts of students being sent to suspension and things like that, which we see going on a lot. And I'm also the founder of Shift, and we offer counseling, financial literacy, and support services to women going through different kinds of shifts in their life.
Afternoon. My name is Alton Williams. I teach in the Criminal Justice Department at Sac State. I'm also work for a program called Project Rebound on Sac State campus, and it's a campus-based reentry program. And essentially, what we do is provide wraparound services for folks that are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. We try to help reduce recidivism through education. And we do a lot of advocacy work in terms of like going to the state capitol and trying to legislate for certain laws to be passed that will benefit folks that have that target on their back of having a felony. And that's it in a nutshell.
Hey y'all.
Hey.
My name is Darius Simpson, and I got the short end of the cord.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. I'm a teaching artist and spoken word person. I teach spoken word at Oakland School for the Arts. I do workshops all over the Bay, which means that I just really enjoy doing things with words, essentially. I facilitate spaces where folks ask questions of each other and not leave with answers, but better questions for themselves and for each other. And yeah, that's it.
So going down the line, I just wanted to ask, which life event helped you, through your resilience, define yourself? Okay.
Now we can go reverse. You can switch it up.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Oh, wait,
That's what happens when your mouth writes a check, sir.
Word. Damn. I think, well, I know poetry and spoken word is a huge part of my resilience, and the life moment that brought poetry officially into my life was in 4th grade. We had a poetry unit, and I was a 4th grade class clown, and I got an A on this project, and that was strange. So my teacher called in my mom and was like, yo, this is amazing. Make sure he keeps doing this thing. So my mom continued various ways to make sure I went on the page when I didn't necessarily want to, but it helped shape and keep me, the end, I think. Yeah, poetry, it wasn't something I chose, but that life moment brought it into me, and it's been with me since then. And even when I was using it for that resilience, I didn't know it was resilience. I was just writing because I felt, and I needed to get something out. And if I hadn't got that out, I don't know what would have happened in my body. The end.
Can you repeat the question for me?
What life event helped define you? So if it's a message of a time of resilience, or what life
Okay,
event?
I understand. I would say for me, honestly, the last time I was incarcerated, and from that moment on, my faith took over, and I decided to make a different choice in my life, and so that was a defining moment for me. And so since then, I've been on the straight and narrow.
Nice.
Yeah.
For me, I would definitely say sometimes it's really hard to make decisions out of integrity, but it would be leaving a religion that I was raised in, and that means maybe losing all of your family, friends, everything. But as a mom, you want to make decisions that your children can see that you stood in integrity, and that could be really hard, but that was one of the best decisions and a life-changing one.
I think that really life itself is filled with life-defining moments. I've had life-defining moments this year, so I think there's plenty of things that you continuously will draw information from. The further and further you live your life. One of the earliest things I think for me was just my mom reading books to me when I was a kid, and then just becoming enthralled with it. And then for me, I think that writing allows me to materialize my thoughts a lot better. So when there was things going on in my house, or things that was going on around me in my community or with family and stuff that I couldn't really materialize the thoughts for, I would write it down, and it would make more sense to me. But in terms of life-defining moments, I think that as you get older, you will continue to have life-defining moments, and it just continues. There's things that you will continuously learn and continuously draw inspiration from. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
For me, there wasn't one particular moment. I love being outdoors, and nature has always been my cathedral, my serenity. And after a trip to Yosemite, spent a week in Yosemite, and I did not see one other person that looked like me. And that spoke volume to me, because knowing the history that's in Yosemite, Buffalo Soldiers being the very first Rangers in Yosemite, and not seeing people that represented that angered me. So that got me into working around issues of diversity and inclusion in the outdoors, calling out government agencies on why this is, reaching out to community organizations, working with them, speaking to them, understanding that all this land is stolen, and for it not to be recognized by government agencies and affinity groups bothered me. So it is my responsibility as a person of color to change that.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this question, and I want it to be answered in the specific order. So, Mr. Williams, especially as a fan of Project Rebound and its 50th anniversary, Miss Chayla, as somebody who needed everything Shift has right now as a young person, and Sister Teresa, who I like to look outside, and then also as And also the people who deal with you as teachers who have to influence young people. So my question is, what do you think about your line of work encourages the resilience of the people that you affect every day? So we can start with Mr. Williams.
One more time for me.
So what do you do? So what do you do in your job, and how do you come about your job to help resilience in the people that you engage in? Because we know that Project Rebound, it has a history and a tradition of having people come through their resilience in a prosperous way. So how do you come across that from your angle of vision to promote that from your line of work?
For me, it's like a passion in that being directly, indirectly affected by the system, the criminal justice system. It informs me in that I want to help folks transcend their situation, understand that the world is bigger than what they may think it was or is. I think that's very important, not necessarily to change their actions, right, but to change how they think about their actions, right, because I think it starts in the mind. And so once you change how you think, then your actions will follow. And so I try to help them through that resistance in that way, and then also just to get that confidence back. I think it's important oftentimes for folks that are fresh out to just lack confidence or belief in themselves. And so I think education is an avenue or a vessel for some that can help them do that, right? And so and I think it's important to not just help folks on the back end. What I mean by that is folks that are coming out, but also on the front end and trying to help folks in our youth, especially before they even enter the system. There's so many consequences that come with that for your life course once you are released. And so I think I answered the question. I hope I did.
You did great.
This one I'll answer as my work at Caliber Schools, and that is, so I was the first person there that helped start the schools, and there's about 200 people now, and I'm the only woman of color. Everyone in the executive team is from Princeton, Harvard, Yale, and I'm not. I didn't go to college at all. I went to University of Phoenix when I got older in my 30s, but that could be really intimidating because I did not have that background. I wasn't raised like that. So now that we have so many employees, and a lot of our employees are teachers' aides or secretaries or janitors, and that's our staff of color. So they come to me a lot like, okay, how did you get there, and what did you do? How did you overcome? How are you sitting with these people and feeling okay? And I'm just talking to them about, it's okay. Just know to stand up for yourself, know to speak up for yourself, even if your voice is shaking. You say something, and then you're helping with the next person. So that's been really encouraging because people do feel comfortable coming to talk to me about situations at their job where something happened over the weekend, like they might have got pulled over and falsely accused of something. So how do they show up at work? How are they resilient on Monday when something really bad just happened over the weekend? How do we overcome that? How do we talk to people at staff and get through and help people understand and help them get resilient from bouncing back from short-term things on top of all the trauma they've already gone through their life? So that's been pretty helpful.
I think my approach is a little different than most people here. My work and the message that I try to get across to people is that, as people of color, we have a responsibility to the land. That is what's most important to me. And when you look at what's happening, climate change, the floods that are happening, the fires that are happening, that will continue to affect us until we start to do something. And as people of color, we are missing from that conversation. And we may not understand how that fits into our life right now, but think about your kids. Think about your grandkids. What world are we leaving to them? And all too often as people of color, we are left out of this conversation. When you look at the National Park Service, it's 83% white. That's a 101-year-old government agency, 80+% white. When you look at the Sierra Club, when you look at SCE, when you look at all of these outdoor organizations, you don't see us. You don't see us on their boards. You don't see us in positions that create jobs, positions of authority. We're always in the background. We're never up front. And we need to fight for that. And that's what I try to instill in younger people, is that you too have a place here. This is your land. It's not about connecting, it's about reconnecting. And I think all too often we think we have to create something, but that's already there for us. As Native Americans, as Latinos, as African Americans, this is our land, and we need to fight harder for it.
You're gonna try to get me outside. For our traditional educators.
I think that the question was like, how do we?
You bring yourself and your levels of resilience to people who have to also have a resilient spirit. So like in the library and when you teach young people.
I think that the main thing that I always like encourage youth to do with like things that I create or things that I incorporate in learning or with the library is to like have them ask questions. I always like try to create like things that are intuitive and allow them to like explore their identity and allow them to like kind of like ask questions. So say like right now I'm working on a poetry program that's writing as an act of self-care. That'll be for the libraries, a collaboration with me in the libraries for National Poetry Month next month. And you know, it'll be interactive and there'll be elements in which, you know, the participants, these people who come to the library every day can take things and write in their own ways and figure out how writing can be transformative to them. So I think that when you allow people to, because just like Raina was saying, we're all children here. We all have an inner child. And I think that creativity is very much an intuitive thing and very much something where you tap into your inner child energy. I think that when you allow people to kind of like freely roam in that space, it allows people to think for themselves and allows people to ask questions and allows people to break outside of their boxes and allows people to be present with their bodies. I think that a lot of the times because we live in a hyper-capitalist world and we're always like go, 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 you know, like a lot of people don't really have time to be present in their body sometimes. So I feel like with like incorporating arts into what I'm doing, I allow people to kind of think intuitively, or at least that's what I try to emphasize. So, yeah.
Do we have to answer?
You don't have to answer, but I mean, you have the mic now, so.
The pressures of panelism.
I mean, you don't have to. I can ask you a separate question because I have more.
No, I'm gonna slide in with this one.
Okay.
I think writing and spoken word for me is all about investigation, a self for each individual artist, each individual student. So I think through that we're trying to find our ways out of and into these situations, just like that resiliency zone, and finding out where we are, how we feel in those moments, and what's happening with us. So I think the work is directly related to resilience. It's all about, especially with my black and brown students, it's all about what we've been through and how we've come to the place that we are and how we move forward intentionally. Less of survival, more of that resilient spirit, and providing them with tools to keep moving and to reset and do that elastic work of resilience.
So, you can keep that, that's fine. So my question for all of you is, what do you do when you have to go to work and you have a bad day? So what one thing of self-care do you do on when you have a bad day and you can't take the day off and you still gotta go to work?
I dance on sidewalks.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's, especially if something happens like in the morning right before I have to go in, like, and I don't have time because I think I try to be horizontal when something upsets me so I can just be grounded and kind of like dodge it. I feel like it can't get me if I'm on the ground. But if I don't have time for that, I definitely shake it out. I have a specific song I listen to. Yep.
It's okay.
Yeah. It's called I'm Here by Tunde Olenarian. It's a Michigan artist. I can play it for you if you want to hear it later.
Somebody remember that he's gonna play that song and then we can all dance.
We're going to dance together, yes.
Yeah.
You like to dance?
I just added to the agenda, people. Okay.
If I'm having a bad day, I don't know. I guess, you know, for us, and when I say us, I mean just minorities in general, right? We know that we kind of like live in two worlds, or at least for me. And so, you know, you have the code switch. And so, you know, when I'm at work, it's kind of like I turn on, right? And so that's what happens. I know I have to turn it on, right? And then I also feed off the energy. Since I teach, I feed off the energy of my class, and that really helps me as well. And so, you know, I leave, you know, whatever I'm going through in the office or at home, and I like to feed off my students, right? Because I feel like the energy I give off, they're going to give back, and then that makes for a better learning experience. And so I definitely feed off their energy. And so if I have a boring class, it's harder to feed off their energy if they're not engaging with me. But that, and then just the ability to code switch, right? And understanding that, you know, I'm having to speak a different language, and my tone and inflections is different. And so I kind of go into it with that mindset, you know, whether I'm having a bad day. If I'm having a bad day, particularly, I think, coming from where I come, it could be some extremely harsh stuff going on. But you have to be resilient in that regard, right? Because I gotta feed the family.
I'll say two things. One, I carry a journal with me all the time, so if it's a lot going on, journaling for sure. Number two, riding on your coattails of code switching. We all feel like we need to code switch, and sometimes people feel like we have to work harder, or people are looking at us more, but one thing I do is just speak up. Today's not a good day, like I just need some time, or be in my own space, and that's okay, because that gives other people permission to know you don't just have to be there and just be a robot. We're not robots. It's okay to have those feelings. You can still get your job done, but you don't have to put on a face. You don't have to do that. Like, you can be you, and you can still be great.
I definitely want to piggyback on journaling. I think that it's very important. Like, there's a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and she talks about like morning pages, and it's very much like a stream of consciousness exercise where you just write things. And to me, it helps clear out my mind. Like, to do it early in the morning, it helps me with like just getting out whatever is on my head, and that's always something I can do, even at any time of the day, to just journal. Like, you know what I'm saying, if something's like bothering me or something's whatever, I can just write it out, get it out of my head. Something else, you know, just like breathing exercises, maybe just taking like 5 to 10 minutes, you know, in your morning before you go out into all the noise and all the people talking and all the stuff you have to deal with and all of the things all the assignments for the day. Just taking like 5 to 10 minutes and, you know, just breathing deeply. You know what I mean? Erica Huggins from the Black Panthers, she was the person who introduced me to that. And it tends to be very helpful. And also definitely, you know, I definitely feel like it's important to let people know, like, you know what I'm saying, like, you know, if someone's like, how are you? Just be like, I'm okay, or I'm, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to necessarily perform like happiness to perform your duties. You know what I'm saying, you can be honest and be like, you know, I'm okay, you know what I mean, or whatever, but you know what I mean, but you're working through the day. So, yeah.
For me, when I'm having a bad day, I call on my ancestors. I remember who they were and who they are through me. And I take to social media, and I, if my family could just chill for a second. Most of my frustration comes from the work I do. So if there's a particular agency or company that has put me in that mood, I will take to social media and call them out publicly. If it's the Park Service, if it's whomever, I'll call people out on what they're not doing. I do that so that other people see it's okay. These people aren't so far above us that they can't be called out. And for the most part, when I do that, I'm good. You know? Because it's like, why stay frustrated at a system that you can call out and that they will be forced to respond? And more likely than not, they are responding through that. I also look up motivational quotes and read them and find myself in that, because I think all too often that's what we are lacking when we are frustrated, is motivation to get beyond the BS that's in front of us. So for me, that's what works. Thank you.
So the reason why I asked is for a lot of our younger audience members, because there's this myth that once you hit a certain age, you have your act together. And it is never true, and whoever told you that lied to you. And I just wanted to show you that even these people who are on this resilience panel, because they epitomize resilience, we still have to do things to make sure nobody gets hurt in our presence while we go through our day. So just understand, and then I wanted you to see all the methods that can be done that can help you go through your day, because some days are a beast. And so it's a good thing to know that there are other people that are on panels that are just like you that have methods of getting through the day. So, three of you guys touched on this, but I do want to talk about being the person of color in a white space and how your resilience has helped that after prayer and hoping you don't punch nobody in the chest during meetings, because that happens to me. So what do you do as a person of color in white spaces or traditionally white spaces to not own, based on your resilience, to help you succeed and to at least thrive and know that you're making a difference?
For me, every space belongs to me. It's not just, I understand how some people define some spaces as white spaces, but for me, understanding the land I'm on, this is my space, period. So I speak my mind no matter where I'm at. And I think a lot of that comes from my family. We as a family do that. We don't hold back, and damn, I try to control it sometimes. but it just comes out, and I don't know how to stop that. But I understand that anywhere I am, that's my space. It's my time to speak my truth to whomever I'm speaking it to, and I don't let people bother me. I'm trying to be nice here and not use the other words, but I don't let people bother me. I don't let people control who I am and what I am. I just speak my truth. And I think all too often in a society that has people on pedestals, and we're told that we can't speak truth to them or we have to calm ourselves down, I don't believe in that. I believe you are no better than me, no matter your title or your position. I'm going to speak my truth, and you may not like it, and we can have a conversation to work through that, but you're no better than me based on your whiteness.
Can you say that one more time, please? That part, that last part.
You can't get me in trouble. I'm just saying, I don't believe that based on your color you're better than me. So you're not better than me because of your whiteness, period.
Thank you, ma'am. Just wanted to make sure everybody got that.
All right, I hear you.
Let's see. So for POC, for folks of color in white spaces, I think that there are a plethora of experiences within that, because even within the POC bubble, there is things like anti-blackness and then colorism and then proximity to whiteness that also has to be acknowledged. It's basically like, if folks of color were like, or even just people in general were like plants, right? You have to, yes, they all need water and sunlight and all these things, but there's you have to know the specificity sometimes. So there's a variety of different experiences that happen within that, pertaining to where you fall within the POC spectrum, So a more fairer skinned person will have to deal with things in opposition to whiteness, but might not have to deal with the same thing that a darker skinned person would have to deal with. Or a black person might have to deal with things in a different kind of medium that a non-black person of color would have to deal with. So I think that, for me as an example, as a black person, with anti-blackness being so prevalent within mediums of information, including academia, you can be in an administrative position and people will still feel like it's okay to, or that it's valid to question your intelligence or question your qualifications, even after you've shown time after time after time after time after time after time that you are qualified to be in the space and that you are qualified to show up in the space. But people will constantly, not just white folks, but people who want to be in proximity to whiteness will question, your ability to do that. And I feel like it's telling and it says more about them than it does me. So I'd rather just live my truth and, show up as I am, and just do the work and show that I'm qualified to do the work, and that, that if I'm in the position where I'm the senior office assistant, for a library, like when I was in college, I was a senior office assistant in a college in a college library that preserved books on all these different identities and cultures, from folks of color, queer people, all these different things. I was second in charge, but because I was a black person, there was always this assumption of certain things. So I think that, you just kind of have to not let that get into your mind, and also understand that says more about that person than it does you, and in the ways in which certain things are normalized in this world. So you just have to show up how you want to show up. I think that's also freedom, because people are talking about diversity and inclusion and representation, and I feel like I'm more interested in empowerment and also freedom. And I feel like freedom, sorry, I don't mean to be taking up too much time, but freedom to me is when folks can show up however they want to show up without being the recipient of violence or exploitation. So, regardless of how you identify across any any spectrum or whatever, you should be able to show up as yourself. It shouldn't be something that's palatable to somebody else, yeah, so that's really all I want to say. So.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is just knowing that white fragility is a thing, and that's not my thing. So when I'm in a space, that's not something that I should be thinking. I should be thinking of the truth, my truth, the truth for people that I'm coming in the room to speak about. Also, number two, knowing it would be a disservice to people if I did not speak up. So it's really a responsibility, especially if you're in a place of power, that you speak up and know your business, know your stuff. So you can't just talk and say, I think this, or that doesn't sound right, or it's not fair. Have your data there. So if you're somewhere and people are saying, we have an equitable company, and I'm pulling something that says, oh, you know what, the black staff makes this, the Latinx staff makes this, the white staff makes that, are we equitable? It's not telling anyone anything, but it's just showing them, and it's bringing it to them, and then if you're equitable, they'll make that decision. So it's just knowing your stuff and not being afraid to speak out.
Yeah, I think it varies for each of us because we probably in different positions and situations. But for me, I just try to be, I try not to be hypersensitive to race, because I tend to be hypersensitive, and you can end up taking things the wrong way sometimes, most of the time not. But, and then also understanding that when I do express myself, do it in a way in which they understand, right? So it's not about me, you should always speak up for yourself, but sometimes it's not what you do, but how you do it. Delivery makes a big difference. So knowing your audience, right? And then also, I think that helps me to dispel certain stereotypes and preconceived notions that folks may have of me because I'm a black man, right? And all the things that come with that, being angry and unapproachable, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I have to be mindful of those things and the way in which I present myself. So when I'm in those spaces, for one, always be true to myself, and then but for two, just being mindful of what's going on around me. And so that's how I navigate those spaces.
Appreciate y'all moving accordingly. I think everything that I personally use has already been said, like speaking up in those moments, knowing exactly what it is you're trying to say. And sometimes maybe not. Sometimes something rub you the wrong way and that shit not okay and you can't articulate that. And it's okay to speak out in those moments too. like, hey Janet, you got me fucked up, and that's it. That's all you got. Like, that's perfectly fine, because what it does is throw that energy back to Janet, and you don't take that home. Yeah. Speaking of, there was
I
something
enjoy
else.
you.
I enjoy y'all. There was something else. Speaking out. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm gonna stop.
Okay, so hold on. I have to have the mic. Sorry. He's looking at me like, don't you dare talk again. Whatever. Yeah, go ahead.
You're talking about being in these spaces, and a lot of places where we go, if it's companies or anything, we might be the only minority in the building, so that's why it's so important for us to create our own spaces. So it's not we're just going into something, but we're making it, and then you're opening the doors for other people.
I remember what it was. Sometimes staying out of white spaces is a form of self-care, like limiting and controlling the time that you spend. Like, it's perfectly normal and okay to stay away from white folks. Yeah, I think sometimes like, nah, they're not going, like, you need to, these motherfuckers crazy. Yeah.
Right. And the church say,
Amen.
all right. Because some days, listen, okay.
Sometimes your resilience is low.
Some days you need that sick day. So my question is, how did you, in your workspaces, how did you begin your engagement with your communities? Ms. Teresa?
Yes.
First of all, you don't bring up the bears.
Can you repeat that?
Do not bring, so this is what Ms. Teresa did. Ms. Teresa said, we should all go camping. This is gonna be great. There's no bears there that I know of.
Oh my God.
So let's talk about black people and bears. Having a fear of bears is not an irrational thing. However, Ms. Teresa believes that we should be out there. Thank you. That is the end of the story.
Can you repeat your question?
How did you begin your engagement with the community?
Oh, I connected with an Oakland-based group called Outdoor Afro. That's how I initially started engaging community, was through Outdoor Afro, and the founder of which is Rumab, who is from Oakland. We started taking groups out on hikes and various outdoor adventures, and that started my connection with community. And once people started hearing about the work I was doing and others, people across the country started reaching out and asking if I would come, to Wisconsin. I was in Oregon last week, leading a hike with the Audubon Society. So it just depends on which platform you use. That allows people to reach out to you. Social media is big in the work I do. People find out about the work I do and they'll reach out, and it just took off that way, making sure that I stay engaged with communities of color specifically is how word of mouth has spread about the work I do. Is that good enough?
That's beautiful. Thank you.
So the question is, how did we start? Or okay, for me,
Especially you, because you have publishing, you have books, you have other things that you do.
I guess, well, in terms of like incorporating art with community or social justice things, the first thing that I did, I'm from Vallejo, California, and my middle school art teacher had this he had like a mural that where he basically just incorporated like all these artists. Like, I'd always had poems or ideas for poems, but I never like completed any of them. And he was like, you want to write a poem and put it on this wall? And so me and all these artists came together and like painted all these different things, and I painted a poem, and we painted people's faces that died and all these things. And it just kind of showed me like how, you can kind of incorporate art and have it mean something, and you can reach out to your community and actually mean something to your community. And then I just kind of like started expanding that further. So like working at SF State for the Richard Oaks Multicultural Center, and Gators. That school is something else. But just seeing like how important it was to preserve the narrative of Black and brown folks through literature, through the arts, and make sure that that's accessible to people, because it just gives us access to our identity. I don't know if I answered that question.
You did.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so the answer to did I answer the question correctly is yes.
I'm about to say.
So there is no wrong answer. So you don't have to ask me. The answer is always going to be yes. Yes.
Just being in the community, talking to people. When we were thinking of opening the schools, you can't just say, I think the community needs that, because that's where savior syndrome comes in. Like, we think you need this. It's going and asking people, what do you want? What do you think we need? What choice do you not have right now that should be opened up to you? And then listening and taking that input and making sure that the people that are affected are involved in the conversations. And then as far as staff, if you're somewhere where there might be a lot of white staff and there's not so many African American staff, what do you need? What do you need to feel safe in this space? Just speaking to people, asking them and making sure they're safe spaces, and then following up, going and talking to the people that can make the change and follow up, so then they know they are in a safe space.
For me, I would say, I think it's two ways in which to think of that, formal and informally. And I would say on the formal sense it was with Project Rebound, but informally I think me personally, just being an example to folks that look like me, folks that are in my family, being a tangible resource to them, to my community, that's how I got engaged, right? And so not only am I gonna preach how to do something a certain way, but I'm gonna show you the fruits of those labors, right? And I think that's important for my niece or my nephew or whoever to be able to come to me and say, I need help filling this out, or can you show me how, right? You need somebody to have paved the way. Right? If it's a path, that means somebody has walked it before you. And so I think that's how one of the ways in which I engage with my community is I made a decision, right, to be an example for folks. I'm from West Oakland, and we moved to Sacramento, but same thing, from West Oakland to Sacramento. But and so when I hear people, talk about me in a positive way, I think that that's me giving back to my community or getting engaged with my community. And then on the formal side of it, just Project Rebound, just trying to help folks that were formerly and currently incarcerated. I think that's a way in which I do it to where it's like, I get paid to do it, but it's really a labor of love, and I would do it for free.
Don't say that.
Don't say that too loud.
They know.
That's beautiful.
But they gonna pay me.
Right. They gonna pay me.
Yeah.
So I'm from Akron, Ohio, and I went to school in Michigan, and I've been in California since it's a year and a half now. I think the first time I engaged with community intentionally, not like just showing up to an action or going somewhere because my mother made me, or it was something with the church or some other entity, like me actually deciding to go into a community and to actually hear the people that were in that community, was in Ferguson in 2014 when everything was, when Michael Brown was killed. My school wasn't doing anything. The black folks from my school, the leaders, the elite of the student organizations, one of the first things they said in our gathering to decide how we should move forward was that it wasn't about race. I was like, all right, bet, I'm out. And that kind of forced me into asking those questions of myself and finding out who I was. So one of the things we did, a few of us went to Ferguson. We had no plan. We had no history in organizing. We didn't know anybody in Ferguson. So what we had to do was to ask folks, like, what's going on here? Like, how are you navigating this? And it was an interesting experience. We learned that we knew more about the case and were more closely following it than the folks that were there. And that was just a trip, just like where this happened and folks are still continuing to move on with their lives and not like full stop, trying to make sure that this thing is settled. But and I think most of my community engagement since then has been community organizing, direct actions, protests, those things. I think poetry is like the secondary thing for community, because it's dope and it's a way to build community and to get engaged with folks. But I think it's a little more formal, different space. But poems and shutting shit down.
I think you think a lot of Yeah, they won't let me. Every time I try to talk, he's looking at me like, don't do it. Okay.
I have a question for you.
Oh,
Yeah.
plot twist.
How do you show up for community?
Well, I have a few things. So I have a nonprofit organization called the Mocha Autism Network, in which we engage with people of color to give more information about autism. In California, only 1 in 10 doctors have autism assessments in Spanish, and we're California, so that's a deficit. I'm currently working with the organization Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated and Autism Speaks and the Special Needs Networks to create inclusionary assessments and education for parents, pastors, and educators. That's one. And I am a student advisor at Cal State East Bay and or Hayward, depending on when you were born. And I am help create a mentor program at MetWest High School called MetWest Women United, which was a full year education program that received an English credit for Oakland high school students. I am a board member of the Museum of Children's Arts, which we are now housed, and I am a board member of the African American Female Excellence Initiative. I'm on the Policies and Commissions Board, in which I write policies for the advancement of Black girls in the Oakland Unified School District.
Yay.
Oh, okay. I have a question, if that's okay, Ms. Teresa.
Go for it.
Okay, so my question is, how important is your social media identity into helping spread your message of resilience? Because, I don't know, I have students following me on my social media, and so what do you guys do if you have community leaders or people in your sphere of influence on your social media? How do you responsibly or irresponsibly, based on your day, portray yourself on social media so that you are portrayed in your sphere of influence?
Yeah. For me, sometimes that's difficult because I am so outspoken, but I've had organizations across the country, and most recently I had the Rockefeller Foundation reach out to me in regards to funding. I am not a nonprofit. I am an individual who cares about the community, which is why I do this work. But I have foundations that reach out to me all the time based on my presence on social media, Facebook and Instagram specifically. They see the message that I put out there, and then they reach out and they ask, how can we work with you? So for those of you who are not clear as to how social media can affect you moving forward, it does. I get a lot of funding because of my online presence. And because of that, I try to slim down my message at times, and then I get called out on that by people of color. So it's like I'm trying to toe the road here and understanding that I'm reaching an audience that looks to me for information and for guidance, and also funding opportunities. So it's like, how can you keep it real, as I've had a cousin to ask me, and understand that corporate America is watching at the same time, and they care very little about what you say outside of social media. But as it comes to social, as this work pertains to social media, and I know that's a big part of this conversation, I will say, put your message out there. Put your message out there of who you are, who you work with, and make sure that your message is clear, because that's how foundations and companies will reach out to you and determine the value that they place on you, which is not always accurate. But if you are looking for funding sources, I would definitely say your presence on social media is being watched. And even when you don't recognize they're watching you, they are. It may not be that foundation's name, it may be a member of their board that's following you. So you are being watched, and if you care about being an influencer or whatever, especially for outdoor brands, such as North Face, REI, King, all these people have people watching influencers, and they're watching what you're saying. If you dog somebody else out, they're watching that. If their intent was to reach out to you, to ask to work with you, that opportunity is gone based on what you said. So I want to encourage everybody to be as honest as you can with who you are, but also understand where you're looking to go. If you're looking to build a community for funding, act one way. If you're looking to be just militant as hell, be that way too. But understand the people that you are pushing aside when that's the message you want to put out there. But for me, on my secret account, I'm militant as hell.
So everybody has a Facebook, right?
Yes.
That's fine. I only have one account. I'm doing something.
Oh, okay.
Everybody's been passed.
Social media. What
Yes.
question?
Like, how do you use your social media?
Oh man, it depends on which one.
Why does everybody have more than one Instagram?
I'm just saying, Facebook is one way, Instagram another
yeah.
way.
Because mamas and them, I get it.
Yeah, so Facebook is that's where most of my coworkers or people I work with, all that's where that's reserved for that stuff, and so let's try to be positive, right? Yeah, be positive on that account, and that's how I do it.
Sir, you don't have to answer the question. I know how you get.
It's too late now. This is the last question. Nah, I don't have to answer the questions. Where was you 20 minutes ago? The question is, how do I push resiliency on my social media?
How do you portray resiliency?
Word. I think being Black and alive is a special kind of resilience. So like every picture, every video. I also think like there's some folks that have a responsibility, or feel like they have a responsibility to speak on the ways in which our bodies are politicized, targeted, and enacted violence against. So I think some parts of that resilience is what we post has nothing to do with those things. Because like naturally, especially the continent that we're on, being Black carries these stories and these histories. So when we post pictures in the ocean, when we post, shout out to you, nature, I see you. We post pictures just eating food, laughing with each other, dancing. That's a special portrayal of resistance or resilience, which isn't necessarily different. Yeah, I think other folks, like, you get to decide how respectable you want to be, and that's when I think of editing so that other folks receive you differently. I think of respectability, because I think it's really important that you're authentic as often as you want to be. And you get to decide how, like, at what point do you want to be this real and not that real. There's definitely space for all of that. And I think the most important thing about being on social media is being authentic, so that the folks that connect with you are as authentic as you. So if you're editing the message and the persona that you're putting out, the folks that are coming to you aren't attracted to who you are. They're attracted to that thing that you've been posting. So, the end.
So I would like to add, just have good people around you, because iron sharpens iron, and then it all works out in the end. So now it's time for question and answer. Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Song lyrics? Yes, sir, Dr. Bayham.
Comment and a question, if it's okay.
Yes, sir.
With respect to white spaces, I know there was some mention about skin color difference. I would caution on that, and I'd love some feedback on that. My experience as somebody who's always been perceived as lighter skinned, I say perceived because that's not a part of my identity structure. It's a big deal within Black spaces. With white spaces, I'm still a nigger. I've always been one, always. There's never been a difference. And then my question, if you want to respond.
I'll let you say anything you need to say.
Oh, well, the question I had was that, so we're talking about resilience. Resilience theory for a long time was a big part of American Indian studies, and I know that we've had a lot of discussions that have made an ode to indigeneity, and I'm wondering for all of you about cross-cultural communications with American Indian activists as well as with Latinx activists on this subject of resilience.
Now, with regards to being Black, yes, like you know, we're all black. You know what I'm saying? Despite the shades or whatever, like I'm a mid-tone, so I'm like a, you know, I'm not like super light-skinned, but I'm not like, you know what I'm saying? But there are also things that, depending on the like degree of visibility to blackness, like how visibly black you are, there are certain things that you will have to deal with. So Darius, who is more dark-skinned than me, definitely has more intense experiences. And then like with me, with my hair, like I'm like light-skinned enough to where you can tell I'm black, but then like my hair texture is very coarse, so I'm very visibly black. Whereas like someone who is more fair-skinned, they can choose to be ambiguous or maybe deny their blackness. But then in terms of colorism and its proximity to anti-blackness, that is global. So you can look at the Latinx community and see, you know, Afro-Latinx people, how they're treated. Or even like, you know what I'm saying, like say like the Dominican Republic, where they rounded up, you know, the president in the 1900s rounded up all the dark-skinned people, and if you couldn't speak Spanish, they would kill you on spot. You know what I'm saying? So colorism is very much a real thing. If you go to Singapore, right, where the Chinese colonized, you know what I'm saying, the Malay people and all these dark-skinned people, if you look at their manifesto, it was basically reiterating this concept of white supremacy, whereas these more pale-skinned people, you know, are more superior to these darker-skinned people. So I'm not really, you know, I'm just kind of speaking on specificity, you know, trying to be, you know, specific on certain things. But there's just different degrees of privilege in which things exist that everybody has to be mindful of. And that's just what I want to talk about, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, and there are people who, like when you're in white spaces, some of your opposition will come from people who want to be in proximity to whiteness, right? So I was a double major in college. I double majored in Black Studies and also in English. And some of my biggest opposition will come from people who wanted to be in opposition to whiteness beyond just white people. So it's like, yes, we're all black, you know what I'm saying? And we all have a myriad of experiences, but there is also, there are also things that are very specific that have to be acknowledged as well. Because there are also, you know, like more palatable versions of what people, you know, prefer from certain types of people. Like that, you know, people, you know, so sometimes people selectively acknowledge their privilege over certain folks. There's like a thing, there's like, you know, I believe that there's selective misogyny and there's also selective anti-blackness. Like a person who identifies as male can say that he respects women, but then he'll disrespect, you know, trans women or sex workers or plus size women or something like that. And the person will be like, you know, Black Lives Matter, or that they value a black life, but it's usually a version that's more palatable to them, right? You know, so like people are saying, you know, justice for Nia Wilson, but then how do you treat people who fit that particular phenotype in your everyday life? You know what I'm saying? So that's more so what I'm speaking about. You have to be specific, and there are specific experiences that happen. And yeah, I just want to pass the mic.
One more question.
Okay, I would like to point out that you didn't have to tell me you had a degree from the College of Ethnic Studies of San Francisco State. As somebody who graduated in class 2003, and I saw that train coming with all lights on. Okay, any other questions? One more question. Any question? Yes, sir.
Yes, I have a question in regards to what you alluded to earlier about just camping in the outdoors and the outdoor experience as far as it pertains to Black people. I like that you mentioned, I believe it's outside afros. Outdoor afros. I wanted to kind of allude to what was mentioned about getting more Black people excited, or getting more Black people interested in going outside and going about the outdoors. Personally, I think that there's a really bad attachment in terms of Black people not wanting to go outside. Like what Monica mentioned, Black people not wanting to go out to camping or out to the woods, or even a deeper constitute to that being just for white people. That's for white folks. White people don't do that. We don't go outside. We don't go to the woods. We don't do that. So my question is, in what ways do you think we can kind of combat like that ongoing like fear for Black people, like we don't like to go outside, and what we can do about like changing that?
Okay. So the question is, how do we reverse the stigma of Black folks going outside?
Wouldn't that be like a trauma thing? Like you have to get over that trauma of being outside so long that.
Yeah, I acknowledge the history, African American history in the outdoors. One of our greatest troopers, as I like to refer to her, is Harriet Tubman, and how she led slaves through these outdoor spaces. So, which is why I say that these outdoor spaces aren't new to us. Historically, Black people have been lynched in these spaces. These have been trails of escape for slaves. I understand that and I acknowledge that, but I also understand and acknowledge the Buffalo Soldiers, who were the first Rangers. First African American superintendent at Sequoia Kings was an African American by the name of Charles Young. So to continue to allow history to keep us away from these spaces that belong to people of color is doing a disservice to those who came before us. They fought so that these spaces, that we would be comfortable in these spaces as well, which is why I do that work. Understanding that we are on a lonely land right now. Understanding that Latinos, understanding that there are 450 Buffalo Soldiers laid to rest at the Presidio in San Francisco that people aren't aware of. It is my responsibility in honor of those who came before us to make sure those stories do not go untold. So that's part of the reason I do this work. And yeah, there are some scary moments in the outdoors, but if we go as a collective and we learn as a collective, we understand that the more people put a negative spin on these spaces, the longer we will refrain from being in these spaces. So I think it's important to understand your history, understand our history in these spaces, but to not allow that to be the reason we don't go. These spaces are serenity. And for me, they're spiritual. You don't have to go far. You could go to Oakland Hills and experience redwoods. We live right here at the Pacific Ocean, and kids in San Francisco have never seen the ocean. Kids that live here in Oakland have never been to the Oakland Hills because that's where white folks live. So the more we tell these stories of why we shouldn't, the longer we go from telling our history and our connection to the land.
All right now. Fine, okay. And Amy's going too. We're all going. All right. So is Nina. Okay. Thank you for coming. I think performances are next.
Yes.
By
First DeMareon.
First DeMareon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For sure. How much time we got? I don't want to go over too much time. About 5. Okay, I'll make it quick. Y'all got it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I know where it goes.
I'm gonna do 2 brief ones. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. My name is DeMareon, y'all know, hopefully. This one is called Information. It's just about the importance of knowing things, because if you don't know anything, you can be told anything, and it's very important to just know things and know yourself and all of that. So, now, a rose can't grow if you limit the water it receives. If you control what a person knows, you can mold what they believe. If you diminish the education of the underprivileged and poor, this creates an expectation that crime or entry-level occupation is all that life has in store. If you raise the rich to be sophisticated and superfluity, anything foreign to their familiarities is forlorn. This disables their opportunity to be aware of cultures and communities different from the one in which they were born. If you teach a man to hate the color of his skin, though made in God's image, his cultural identity is smothered by hatred of oneself and others, backstabbing one's own brothers in the pursuit of privilege. Like water helps in cultivation of every single rose, people are products of information to which they are exposed. Thank you. And this one is called The Notion of Rudiment. Can everybody still hear me okay? Mm-hmm. All right. So that one was part of an older collection of poems called Looking Forward. And this one is part of a newer collection of poems called Blemish that I'll hopefully have done very soon. Okay, so, and it's just about like the importance of like beginning and starting. Like, you know, no journey is perfect, and understanding that as long as you are starting, as long as the most important thing is to start, and the most important thing is to put your foot forward on the journey. You know what I'm saying, regardless of how long it takes or whatever. So now, is it truly gratifying to be fulfilled in an instant? Is it possible for a person to have answers when they have taken but a step on the cobblestone, leading to the wilderness which breeds curiosity? Is it passionate to speak with the intensity of Illinois midsummer when your thoughts are a budding violet? Is it love to shower the soil of others, tilting the garden spout farther than pillars of wood which shield your heart while standing in the midst of guileless sprouts unversed in the language of care? Is it truly naive to appreciate brevity? Is life the arable land from which rare delicacies are chosen, flourishing on occasion yet perishable if not consumed? Is it the uncertainty of time that urges the youthful hand into the burgeoning crop field, its cantaloupes not yet ripened, its cherimoyas sour in taste though ever fleeting as autumn waves gently from afar, informing you that everything is impermanent? Thank you. And that's it.
He has his books for sale.
I do.
Hey y'all. Hello again. We meet again without a table and a mic. Yeah, again, my name is Darius Simpson, and I too have books. This is a book I put out last year. It's called Conversion Theory. I always feel kind of weird going into the bag because the unzip is always epic on the stage. I feel like I should have something more than a book inside. Like, I don't know. That was just a side note. It has nothing to do with anything. You're like a magician. I just start pulling shit up. Yeah, the poem I'm gonna do is from page, I think 79 in there. And it's about dancing in Black boys. I learned how to moonwalk next to a vacuum. And I still take steps back when life sucks. In 6th grade, I thought that my body was a sermon. So I learned how to pray with my feet. Back when dance was the only religion we knew, I was baptized while sliding backwards at a talent show. And at 12 years old, I thought this was worship. But my mother said it was training. She said, when you black, rhythm is both how you prepare for battle and recover from the war zone. She told me if I keep moving, that I can learn how to dodge bullets if I practiced hard enough. By the time my father showed me his scars from breakdancing, I had already learned the choreography of a traffic stop. I became a performer whenever the red and blue lights flashed in my rearview mirror. I knew my lines. I knew how to keep my hands visible in case of combustion, how the wrong move might lead to me never dancing again. The day a cop told me I didn't belong in the neighborhood I grew up in, my tongue was a wet fuse, my voice a pinned grenade, my fists were nuclear missiles, this cop's mouth pressing launch codes. He wanted to see how many words it would take to cause a chain reaction. He wanted me to explode on the side of the road so we could make a street sign out of my shrapnel. He wanted my mother to have to come down to the sidewalk that night to identify what was left of me. So instead I smiled. I figured it was best that we both make it home in one piece. But that night, I danced in an empty parking lot for 2 hours just to avoid detonating. And I think all us black boys fall into bomb making this way, as an attempt to defuse a weapon we wear every day. Black boys dance to show that our bloodstream is jet fuel, to prove that our spines be rocket ship, that at any moment we could blast off and leave this whole planet behind us. Besides, what threat could America make against a body that has already proven it will blow up on command? The next time y'all see a black boy shake so hard, you think his back's broken, consider that we break our own bones just to prove we're still in control of them. Consider viral videos of black boys dancing, a reclaiming of land we was told was never ours to begin with. Don't ask why y'all always dancing. Ask what kind of country makes its people feel like they're safer when moving. We dance because being black is stressful. We dance because we got lives to live. We dance because after a long day, sometimes defying gravity is the only rebellious thing our bodies have time to do. We dance because you can't hit what you can't catch. Our dance is alluding to war zone. Our dance is an armed resistance. Our dance is a form of combat. Ever so often, I have flashbacks to the battles when the bass is loud enough to make me forget that I'm not a soldier anymore, or the music is recruitment enough for me not to care. In those moments, I remember the living room that I turned into a training camp, make my limbs into a bomb shelter, and let the beat blow me away.